Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were considered impenetrable for almost 2 decades. A unique Hollywood union that appeared to resist time, fame, and pressure. A country music artist and an Oscar-winning actress who had somehow overcome the odds. However, that meticulously constructed image started to fall apart in 2025. Days after Keith quietly left their Nashville residence, Nicole submitted a divorce. With that choice, long-kept secrets started to come to light. Betrayal, emotional weariness, and years of silent sacrifice eroded the relationship behind the public grins, the hand-holding, and the well-timed red carpet appearances. In actuality, what the public loved as devotion was an illusion that had been meticulously preserved for far too long. Nicole has been there for years, protecting a guy who, in her opinion, had given up on their union. They were Hollywood's preferred representation of enduring love for nearly 20 years. Evidence that many people thought fame didn't have to ruin everything it came into contact with. At the Day USA Gala in Los Angeles in 2005, their journey started out like a fairy tale. An evening honoring Australian achievements overseas. What came next appeared to be magic. Years later, something much more brittle came to an end. Perfection conceals a silent anguish. Nicole, who was 38 at the time, was still radiant from winning the Oscar. However, scars that had never healed lurked behind the lights. After her traumatic divorce from Tom Cruise, she lost custody of her adoptive children. She was still burdened by Isabella and Connor. She had recovered her inner strength, redesigned her image, and restored her career. However, the feeling of family she had always envisioned remained terribly unattainable. A year younger, Keith was a rising star in the country music industry, and his songs conveyed the pain of a guy who was always fleeing his own shadow. He has devoted years to addiction battles, sometimes successful, sometimes unsuccessful. They appeared to be opposites to the outer world. However, they were both mirror images of the same shattered desire. Two broken hearts looking for something solid to cling to. They clicked right away, yet their relationship didn't turn into a tabloid frenzy. It took Keith months to give her a call. After their initial encounter, subsequently acknowledging that her presence terrified him. Everything proceeded swiftly when the call did come. They were wed in a small candlelit ceremony at Sydney's St. Patrick's Estate in June 2006. During the reception, Keith sang to Nicole, who looked radiant in her Balenciaga gown. It felt like night. Intensely sentimental wedding that some have compared to a gold-scripted love romance. Fairy tales, however, hardly make it to the actual world. Keith checked himself into an alcohol recovery facility just 4 months after the wedding. Nicole was caught off guard. But instead of leaving, she took her usual action. She remained. Throughout his treatment, she paid him visits, protected him from the media, and explained to friends that forgiveness was a sign of love. In actuality, she was battling not just for Keith but also for the family she had lost and longed to reunite with. Nicole silently worked to prevent the illusion from crumbling throughout the ensuing years. Keith thanked her in public on award platforms, calling her the woman, his voice trembling, who prevented his death. She expressed the same attitude, calling him the one who helped her rediscover who she was. Sunday Rose, their first daughter, was born in 2008, and Faith Margaret followed in 2010. From the outside, it appeared perfect. Nashville's wild heart and Hollywood's well-behaved queen were ultimately calmed by love. In private. But the cracks became more profound. What they had created was gradually undermined by endless tours, the residual effects of addiction, and Nicole's ongoing anxiety about losing another husband. She waited all night for calls that never arrived. He used the only coping mechanism he was aware of. Burying tiredness in distance, music, and labor. Nicole maintained her composure, strength, and unending forgiveness. However, even grace has its bounds. Everyone's favorite fairy tale had faded by the time the truth was revealed. It was breaking. The flawless illusion was starting to unravel. Over time, their marriage turned into a show. Nicole and Keith had already weathered hardships that would have destroyed most couples by the time they celebrated their 10th anniversary. The pressure of celebrity, rehabilitation, and separation. However, the worst burden was having to seem indestructible. They became experts at feigning. They clutched hands like teenagers on the red carpet. "We've never been stronger. We're each other's rock," they said in carefully repeated lines during interviews, but underneath those statements was intense fatigue as Nicole supported a marriage that was wearing her down. While Keith's life remained characterized by chaos, long tours, sleepless nights, and the constant pull of temptation, Nicole's world was rooted in routine and family, the stability she had once lost with Tom Cruise, and their love became a delicate balancing act. Keith was growing restless, tired of being seen as the one who always needed saving, and Nicole and Keith tried to protect their real life doesn't follow rules, schedules clashed, promises fell through, quiet resentment took the place of passion, she wanted presence, he wanted space, and by the mid-2000s, their marriage had become part of a public brand. They had a marriage with rules, never being apart for more than a few weeks, and always talking before going to bed. Fans needed to believe in them, so they played their parts. At award shows, Nicole would smile, poised and gracious, while Keith would kiss her shoulder and whisper something sweet for the cameras. However, insiders noticed the cracks, the forced laughter, the rehearsed affection, and the way she occasionally flinched. To friends, it was obvious that Nicole was worn out from serving as his pillar of support. To Keith, her need for control felt oppressive, the man she had once assisted in saving no longer desired to be saved. And the woman who had once found serenity in him now felt imprisoned inside a performance she could no longer maintain. By 2023, rumors had grown louder, they were leading different lives, and he was more absent. More than home, and she was done acting. Despite this, Nicole struggled to keep the family together, having already lost 2 children to distance once and refusing to lose 2 more to silence. The gap between them grew more and more pronounced every day, until love finally gave way to distance, and by early 2024, the rifts were unavoidable. Back in Nashville, Keith Urban had quietly set up his own place, telling friends he needed space to think. The truth was much simpler and much crueler, but friends noticed a change in Nicole Kidman's voice while she was filming Practical Magic 2 with Sandra Bullock in London. Her voice had become softer, uncertain, and almost detached, and she no longer spoke of Keith in the present tense. For months, Nicole thought they were going through another tough time, but Keith had already determined the marriage was ended. She calmly responded to tabloids' questions about her marriage by saying, "Marriage takes work. We're both committed." By June 2024, they were leading separate lives, with Nicole working long hours in London and Keith traveling in a noisy environment that drowned out his guilt. Their commitment had subtly become one-sided, and they had stopped answering calls and attending family dinners. Their last public appearance together was at a soccer match in Nashville on June 20th. They appeared rigid and aloof, like 2 actors compelled to share a stage after the play was over. According to friends, that was the night Keith made the decision to permanently leave the family home. Nicole returned from London to find the house empty. There was no argument, no farewell, only silence. That silence was intolerable for a woman who had spent years believing that love could triumph over all obstacles, but she refused to allow the story to devolve into chaos. Despite rumors about another woman in his touring circle, Nicole maintained her composure, concentrating on her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and making a self-promise that no matter what happened, she would not allow history to repeat itself. When word leaked out in late September that Nicole had filed for divorce, the public assumed she was the one ending the marriage, but those closest to her knew the truth: Keith had left months earlier. Her filing was closure rather than retaliation. That rocked Hollywood. On September 30th, 2025, Nicole Kidman filed for divorce. The paperwork was straightforward: irreconcilable differences. However, behind those two words were 19 years of loyalty, suffering, and silence that finally broke. According to insiders, Nicole struggled over the decision for months, secretly hoping Keith would change his mind, but he never did. The timing of the moment was even more painful. Nicole filed for divorce just 24 hours after the world found out that Keith had moved out of their Nashville home. To those close to her, the move was survival, to others, it seemed cold. In fact, he had signed his part of the divorce paperwork weeks earlier, silently accepting that the marriage was over. Despite the fact that she had fought for the marriage long after Keith had given up on her, the divorce documents made it clear that Nicole's top priority was her daughters, and she requested primary custody. One insider told Woman's Day that filing so publicly was Nicole's small act of retaliation after realizing Keith had given up on her. Nicole had significant personal wealth, so this was never about money, it was about providing stability for her daughters. However, Keith's reaction to the divorce shocked everyone, as he appeared on stage just days after the filing. Keith was granted residential custody of Sunday Rose, then 17 years old, and Faith Margaret, 14, for 59 days each year, with no requests for spousal or child support. The crowd gasped as he changed the lyrics of one of his breakup songs, changing the line to "Take your space and take your unreasonable reasons." There was no wedding ring, and instead of performing The Fighter, the love song he had once dedicated to Nicole, he changed the lyrics. The message was clear: for the first time, Nicole had. Nicole, who had once rebuilt her life after Tom Cruise, was now forced to watch her second great love unravel in front of the entire world. The secrets Nicole could not reveal, while she remained silent, composed, dignified, and devastated. He was striking back in public, using the stage to rewrite the narrative, casting himself as the one who had been left behind. Longer keep. Nicole Kidman did something she rarely permits herself to do in the weeks following the divorce's public announcement: she stopped concealing her suffering. There were no staged family photos or polished interviews with flawless sound bites, only honesty followed by silence in an October 9 Vogue cover story. When asked how she felt at this point in her life, Nicole said quietly, "How many times do you have to learn that you think you know where your life is going and then it doesn't go that way?" The interviewer described her as raw, vulnerable, and uncertain just before the split was formally announced. Her modest admission was an obvious indication that she had previously foreseen what was going to happen. According to her friends, she clung to hope right up until the very last. Despite her heartbreak, she continued to adore him. One source told the Daily Mail, she would take him back in a heartbeat. Nicole couldn't stop loving him even after he left, despite rumors that he had become close to another woman in the music business, but love was insufficient anymore, and the same devotion that had once made her unique had gradually turned into her own identity. Prison. According to those close to the couple, Keith had been emotionally distant for months prior to his departure. He discreetly packed his things and left their Nashville compound while Nicole was in London filming Practical Magic 2, and when she returned, he was gone, no warning, no explanation. To make things worse, Nicole refused to publicly humiliate him despite growing rumors of flirtations on tour, including excessively playful moments on stage with a younger guitarist. She didn't post, she didn't lash out, and she didn't confirm or deny anything. One insider described the discovery that he had already signed the divorce papers weeks earlier as, like someone took a sledgehammer to her entire world. But after the storm, what Nicole finally revealed, the headlines had started to fade by late October 2025, but a different picture of a woman who carried a marriage far longer than she should have, who forgave more than she ever admitted, and who finally ran out of pieces of herself to give, came to light through friends and carefully chosen words. People close to Nicole Kidman said, "Nicole has finally stopped asking why he left." Kidman was spotted walking hand in hand with her daughters in Nashville, her countenance serene but unreadable. Her quiet spoke louder than any interview ever could. She understood that if someone doesn't want to be saved, they can't be saved. According to a buddy, for the first time in 4 years, Nicole was no longer trying to be the ideal wife, caregiver, or rescuer. instead, she was just trying to be herself again, quietly, and in private. In talks with friends, Nicole acknowledged that the hardest part wasn't losing Keith, but rather realizing that he had given up long before she did. She persevered until the very end, an insider told Woman's Day. It was painful to learn that he might have been using bits and pieces of their private life in his music, but once she realized that he had already planned his departure, she knew it was really over. Nicole reportedly believes Keith used their private texts and arguments as inspiration for lyrics on his 2024 album, High and Alive. When she confronted him about it, he went silent, and that silence told her everything. Despite everything, Nicole has maintained her composure. According to sources, she decided not to take revenge or reveal every personal detail, even though she had the option. Instead, she is concentrating on her daughters, her career, and preserving the harmony she worked so hard to establish. Friends say she is adamant about staying in Nashville so her daughters can complete their education without interference. Her only request in the divorce, 306 custody days annually, was not about control. Nicole's heartbreak is painfully familiar to those who have known her for decades. She lost her family after her divorce from Tom Cruise, and now she's lost another great love, but this time she's not running away. Instead, she's embracing it head-on and transforming suffering into something subtly defiant. Nicole Kidman famously remarked, "You can't control life. The Hollywood marriage is gone, but what's left is something much more genuine." A woman who at last stopped shielding the guy who had broken her heart. Only you can live it. Tell us in the comments below if you believe she made the right decision by ultimately leaving. Remember to hit like, subscribe, and the bell for more authentic Hollywood tales.